So this happened about 8 months ago when I was house-sitting for my aunt in this really remote area of Oregon. She lives way out in the mountains, maybe 40 minutes from the nearest town. The house sits on like 10 acres of forest, and her closest neighbor is probably 2 miles away. Perfect place to get some writing done, which is why I agreed to watch the place while she visited my cousin in Florida. The first few nights were pretty normal. I'd work on my laptop during the day, make dinner, watch some Netflix, then head to bed around 11. But on the 4th night, I had this really vivid dream. I was walking through the house in complete darkness, no lights on anywhere. In the dream, I kept hearing this scratching sound coming from the walls, like something was trying to claw its way through from the outside. I remember following the sound from room to room, getting more and more anxious as it got louder. The weird part was how real everything felt. I could feel the cold hardwood floors under my bare feet, smell the faint scent of my aunt's lavender candles, even feel the texture of the walls as I ran my hands along them following the scratching. When I finally woke up, I was actually standing in the hallway in my pajamas. I figured I'd just been sleepwalking, which was strange because I'd never done that before, but whatever. The next morning I was making coffee when I noticed something odd. There were these thin scratches on the outside of the kitchen window. They looked fresh, like someone had dragged their fingernails down the glass. But they were way too high up to have been made from ground level. You'd need a ladder to reach that spot. I checked around the house and found similar scratches on 3 other windows, all at the same impossible height. I called my aunt to ask if she knew anything about them, maybe from tree branches or something. She seemed confused and said there had never been any damage to the windows before. She suggested maybe it was from birds, but the marks were definitely fingernail scratches, not beak marks. I tried to brush it off, but it bothered me all day. That night I had the same dream again. Walking through the dark house, following the scratching sounds. But this time, when I got to the living room window, I could see a shadow outside. It was the shape of a person, but stretched impossibly tall, with arms that seemed way too long. In the dream, I pressed my face against the glass trying to see better, and that's when I realized the scratching wasn't coming from something trying to get in. It was coming from me. I was the one scratching at the windows from the inside, my fingernails scraping desperately against the glass. I woke up standing at that exact living room window, my hands pressed against the glass. When I looked down, there were fresh scratches on the inside of the window, right at my eye level. My fingernails were torn and bleeding. I was seriously freaked out at this point. I'd never had problems with sleepwalking, and definitely nothing this intense. I decided to set up my phone to record myself sleeping, just to see what was actually happening. I also moved all the sharp objects out of the bedroom and locked the front door, hiding the key in a place my sleeping self hopefully wouldn't think to look. The recording from that night was disturbing as hell. Around 2:30 a.m., I got up from bed with my eyes completely closed and walked straight to the kitchen. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, just swaying slightly back and forth. Then I went to every window in the house, one by one, and scratched at them from the inside. The sound was awful, like nails on a chalkboard. What made it worse was that I was smiling the whole time. Not a happy smile, but this blank, creepy expression like I was enjoying it. The next day I found scratches on every single window in the house. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. When I went outside to look at the damage, I found footprints in the dirt beneath each window. Large footprints that definitely weren't mine. And they were facing the house, like someone had been standing there watching me scratch from the inside. I called my friend Jake and told him everything. He thought I was losing it and suggested I see a doctor, but he agreed to drive up and stay with me for a night. I was relieved to have someone else there. We set up cameras in the living room and bedroom, and Jake said he'd stay awake to watch me. According to Jake, around 3 a.m. I sat up in bed and stared directly at the camera for almost 5 minutes without blinking. Then I got up and walked to the window, but this time I just stood there. I didn't scratch or do anything weird. Jake said he called my name softly, but I didn't respond. After about 20 minutes, I went back to bed. But when we checked the cameras the next morning, they showed something completely different. On the recording, I got up and walked to the window like Jake said, but then the footage showed me opening the window and climbing outside. For the next hour, I was apparently walking around the perimeter of the house, stopping at each window and scratching at them from the outside. The cameras showed me somehow reaching the second-story windows, moving in ways that didn't seem physically possible. Jake swore this wasn't what he saw. He said I never left the room, never opened the window. But the recording clearly showed me outside, and when we went to check, there were fresh scratches on all the windows from the outside, including the ones on the second floor that would be impossible to reach without a ladder. That's when I realized what was happening. I wasn't sleepwalking. I was somehow living in 2 realities at once. In one reality, Jake saw me standing safely by the bedroom window. In another reality, I was outside scratching at the glass. The dreams weren't just dreams anymore. They were becoming real, existing parallel to the waking world. I packed up and left that same day. I couldn't handle staying there another night, not knowing which reality was real or if they were somehow merging together. Before I left, I walked around the house one more time. Every window was covered in scratches, inside and out, forming patterns that almost looked like words or symbols. A few weeks later, my aunt called me. She said she'd come home to find all her windows destroyed, covered in scratches. But she also said something that made my stomach drop. Her neighbor had called to report seeing someone walking around her property at night while she was away. Someone tall and thin, with unnaturally long arms, scratching at the windows from the outside. I never told her about the dreams or what happened to me there. But sometimes, even now, I'll wake up and find scratch marks on my own windows. They're always too high to reach from the ground, and I live on the 3rd floor of an apartment building. I've started sleeping with my hands taped in mittens, but somehow the scratches keep appearing. The worst part is the dreams haven't stopped. I still dream about walking through dark houses, following that scratching sound. But now, in the dreams, I'm not alone anymore. There's someone else there, someone tall and thin, teaching me where to scratch and how to reach the windows that should be impossible to reach. I'm starting to think that whatever I encountered in my aunt's house wasn't just in my dreams. It was something real that found a way to pull me into its world, and now it's following me back into mine. This happened about 6 months ago when I was staying at my grandmother's house for the weekend. She lives alone in this old farmhouse about an hour outside of Nashville. The place has been in our family for like 60 years, and honestly it shows. Creaky floors, old wallpaper, and way too many mirrors. My grandmother has this thing about mirrors. There's at least one in every room, sometimes 2 or 3. I was there to help her with some yard work and fix a few things around the house. Saturday went fine, we got a lot done, and I was planning to head home Sunday evening. That first night I stayed in my dad's old bedroom upstairs. It has this huge antique mirror on the dresser that faces the bed directly. I'm not usually bothered by stuff like that, but something about it felt off. Maybe it was just being in an unfamiliar place. I had this really weird dream that night. I dreamed I woke up and saw someone standing in the mirror. Not a reflection of someone in the room, but someone actually inside the mirror itself, like it was a window into another room. The person looked exactly like me, but wrong somehow. Same face, same hair, but the expression was completely blank, like a mannequin. In the dream, I got up and walked closer to the mirror, and my reflection did the same thing. But we weren't moving together. There was this delay, like my reflection was copying me a split second too late. When I actually woke up, I was standing right in front of that mirror. My hand was pressed against the glass, and there was this weird condensation around my palm print, like the mirror was warmer than it should be. I figured I'd just been sleepwalking, which was weird because I'd never done that before, but whatever. I went back to bed and didn't think much of it. The next morning my grandmother made breakfast and we were talking about the day's plans when she mentioned something strange. She said she'd heard footsteps upstairs around 3 a.m., like someone was walking back and forth in the hallway. She'd assumed it was me using the bathroom or something, but when she listened closer, it sounded like the footsteps were coming from multiple directions at once. I didn't mention my weird dream or the sleepwalking thing. I just said maybe the old house was settling or something. But it bothered me all day. That afternoon while my grandmother was napping, I went back upstairs to look at that mirror again. In the daylight it looked normal, just an old antique mirror with an ornate wooden frame. But when I looked closely at the glass, I could see faint smudge marks all over it, like someone had been pressing their hands and face against it from the inside. That night I decided to stay up and see if anything weird happened. I positioned myself in the bed where I could watch the mirror without it looking like I was staring at my own reflection. Around midnight I started getting drowsy, but I forced myself to stay awake. That's when I saw it. My reflection in the mirror started moving on its own. I was lying still on the bed, but my reflection sat up and turned its head to look directly at me. Not at where I would be if it was a normal reflection, but actually at me, like it could see me watching. The reflection smiled, but I wasn't smiling. Then it got up from the bed in the mirror and walked toward the front of the mirror, getting bigger as it approached the glass. I wanted to move, to run, but I couldn't. It was like sleep paralysis, but I was still awake. My reflection pressed its hands against the inside of the mirror and started mouthing words I couldn't hear. Then it started getting frustrated, hitting the glass harder and harder. I could hear faint tapping sounds coming from the mirror, like someone knocking from the other side. Suddenly I could move again. I jumped up and ran downstairs, not caring if I woke up my grandmother. I spent the rest of the night on the living room couch, but I could barely sleep. Every time I closed my eyes I felt like something was watching me. The next morning my grandmother found me on the couch and asked if everything was okay. I told her I'd had bad dreams and couldn't sleep in the bed. She got this worried look on her face and sat down next to me. She said something had been bothering her about that room for months. She'd been hearing noises at night, and sometimes when she'd walk by the room during the day, she'd catch glimpses of movement in the mirror even though no one was in there. She also told me something that made my blood run cold. 3 weeks earlier, her neighbor Mrs. Patterson had come over for coffee and mentioned seeing someone in the upstairs window of my grandmother's house. Someone walking back and forth, but Mrs. Patterson said it didn't look like my grandmother. It looked like a man, and the movement was wrong somehow, like the person was walking in reverse or sideways. The thing is, my grandmother had been downstairs the whole time, and there was nobody else in the house. I convinced my grandmother to let me take the mirror down and put it in the basement. We wrapped it in old sheets and carried it downstairs together. As we were moving it, I swear I could feel weight shifting inside the frame, like something was rolling around behind the glass. My grandmother felt it too because she kept asking if I was losing my grip on my end. That night I slept better, but I had another dream. I was in a room that looked exactly like my dad's old bedroom, but everything was reversed, like I was seeing it from inside the mirror. I could see the bed and the dresser, but they were backwards. And I could see myself sleeping in the bed, but from the perspective of where the mirror used to be. In the dream, I tried to call out to wake myself up, but no sound came out. When I woke up the next morning, I found muddy footprints in the basement. They led from the bottom of the stairs directly to where we'd stored the mirror, then circled around it several times before going back to the stairs. The prints were my shoe size and tread pattern, but I hadn't been in the basement since we moved the mirror. My grandmother said she'd heard someone walking around down there around 4 a.m., but she'd assumed it was me checking on something. When I told her I'd been asleep all night, she got really quiet. We went down to check on the mirror together, and the sheet we'd wrapped it in was pulled back, exposing the glass. There were handprints all over it from the inside, and condensation covering the surface like someone had been breathing on it heavily. I left that morning instead of staying until evening like I'd planned. I didn't want to spend another night in that house. But the dreams followed me home. Every night for the next week, I'd dream about being trapped inside mirrors, watching my real self from the other side of the glass. I started covering all the mirrors in my apartment with towels and sheets. My grandmother called me about 2 weeks later. She said Mrs. Patterson had seen the man in the upstairs window again, even though the mirror wasn't in that room anymore. But this time, Mrs. Patterson said the figure was pressing its hands against the glass from the inside, like it was trapped and trying to get out. The worst part is what my grandmother told me next. She'd been having dreams about someone who looked like me walking around her house at night, but it wasn't really me. In the dreams, this other version of me would go from mirror to mirror throughout the house, pressing my face against each one and mouthing words she couldn't understand. She said even in the dreams, she knew it wasn't really me because of the way this other version moved. Too smooth, too deliberate, like someone who wasn't used to walking. I haven't been back to visit her since then. I tell myself it's because I've been busy with work, but honestly I'm scared of what might happen if I go back there. Sometimes I wonder if there are two versions of me now. The real me, and the one that got trapped in my grandmother's mirrors. The really disturbing part is that I've started seeing my reflection delay sometimes. Just for a split second, but it's there. Like when I brush my teeth or wash my face, my reflection will keep moving for just a moment after I've stopped. I've been avoiding mirrors as much as possible, but you can't avoid them completely. Last week my neighbor mentioned seeing someone in my apartment window late at night when she knew I wasn't home. Someone who looked like me, but was just standing there motionless, staring out at the street. The thing is, the window she was talking about faces a mirror in my hallway. I'm starting to think whatever was in my grandmother's mirror found a way to follow me home. And now I don't know which one of us is real anymore. This happened during my junior year of college when I was working the night shift at this 24-hour laundromat near campus. It wasn't the best job, but it paid decent and I could usually get homework done since it was pretty quiet after midnight. The place was one of those older laundromats with like 30 washers and dryers, fluorescent lighting that buzzed constantly, and this weird echo that made every sound seem louder than it should be. I'd been working there for about 3 months when I started having these really vivid dreams about the place. In the dreams, I'd be doing my usual shift but all the machines would be running at once, even though there was nobody there. The sound was overwhelming, like this constant rumbling and sloshing that got louder and louder until I'd wake up. I figured it was just because I was spending so much time there, you know. Sometimes when you work somewhere long enough it starts showing up in your dreams. But then the dreams started getting weirder. I dreamed that I was walking around the laundromat doing my normal cleaning routine, but every time I'd open one of the washers to check if it was empty, there would be something inside that definitely wasn't clothes. Sometimes it was dirt and leaves, like someone had been washing mud. Other times it was these weird stains that looked almost black under the fluorescent lights. The smell in the dreams was awful too, like something rotting. The first time I had that dream, I woke up thinking it was so realistic I could actually smell that rotting odor. I figured maybe something in my dorm room had gone bad, but I couldn't find anything. When I got to work that night though, I noticed one of the washers in the back row had this weird stain around the lid. It was dried and crusty, and when I got closer to clean it, the smell hit me. It was the exact same smell from my dream. I asked my manager about it the next day, and she said sometimes people wash really gross stuff and don't clean up after themselves. She told me to just use bleach and scrub it out, which I did. But it bothered me because I was pretty sure that washer had been clean when I'd done my rounds the night before. The dreams kept happening, usually 2 or 3 times a week. Always the same thing, me walking around the laundromat finding gross stuff in the machines. And almost every time, I'd come to work the next night and find evidence that matched what I'd dreamed. Stained machines, weird smells, sometimes even mud tracked across the floor in the exact pattern I'd seen in my dream. I started keeping a little notebook where I'd write down what I dreamed and then check the next night to see if anything matched up. It was matching up way too often to be a coincidence. After about 2 weeks of this, I was pretty freaked out, but I didn't know what to make of it. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Tell my manager I was having prophetic dreams about dirty laundry? Things got really weird about a month later. I had this dream where I was doing my usual walkthrough, but when I got to washer number 23 in the back corner, I opened it and there was a pile of bloody clothes inside. In the dream, I could see they were like work clothes, jeans, and a flannel shirt, but they were soaked in what looked like blood. The smell was so strong I actually gagged in the dream, which had never happened before. When I woke up, I felt sick to my stomach. Something about that dream was different, more intense than the others. I almost called in sick to work that night, but I needed the money and I figured maybe if I went in and checked, it would just be another weird stain or something normal. But when I got to work and did my first round of checks, washer 23 was running. The machine was going through a wash cycle, which was strange because the laundromat had been empty when I'd arrived and I hadn't seen anyone come in. I figured maybe someone had started it right before I got there and left, which wasn't uncommon. I waited for the cycle to finish, and when it did, I opened the lid. The smell hit me immediately. It was that same rotting smell from my dreams, but stronger and mixed with something metallic. Inside were clothes that looked exactly like what I'd seen in my dream. Dark jeans and a flannel shirt, but they were stained with something dark that had turned the wash water reddish-brown. I slammed the lid shut and backed away from the machine. My hands were shaking and I felt like I was going to throw up. I called my manager, but it went straight to voicemail. I didn't know what else to do, so I called the police. When the cops got there, they asked me to show them what I'd found. But when we opened washer 23, it was completely empty. Clean and dry, like it hadn't been used in hours. The officers looked at me like I was crazy, and honestly I felt crazy. They asked if I'd been drinking or using drugs, which I hadn't. Eventually they left, but not before suggesting I might want to find a different job if the night shift was getting to me. I stayed until morning to finish my shift, but I kept checking that washer every 20 minutes. It stayed empty and clean the whole time. When my manager came in the next morning, I told her what happened. She was nice about it but said maybe I should take a few days off, that working alone all night can mess with your head sometimes. I took the next week off, but the dreams didn't stop. If anything, they got worse. Now I was dreaming about finding more than just bloody clothes. Sometimes there were personal items mixed in, like wallets and jewelry. In one dream, I found a driver's license in the bottom of a washer, but I couldn't make out the name or picture clearly. When I went back to work, I decided to do some research. I started looking up missing persons reports in our area, just to see if anything matched what I was seeing in my dreams. I found 3 people who'd gone missing in the past 6 months, all from neighborhoods within a few miles of the laundromat. 2 men and a woman, all in their 20s or 30s. What really got to me was that one of the missing guys, Marcus, had been wearing a dark flannel shirt and jeans when he disappeared. The description matched exactly what I'd seen in my dream about the bloody clothes. I started paying more attention to who came into the laundromat during my shifts. Most of the late-night customers were college students or people getting off second-shift jobs, pretty normal. But there was this one guy who'd come in maybe once a week, always around 2 or 3 a.m. He was older, maybe in his 40s, and he always brought these huge loads of dark clothes. He'd use the same washers in the back corner every time, including number 23. The guy was polite enough, always said hello and minded his own business. But something about him made me uncomfortable. Maybe it was the way he'd watch me when he thought I wasn't looking, or how he always paid in exact change like he'd counted it out ahead of time. He also had this habit of staying in the bathroom for like 15 or 20 minutes at a time, which was weird. I started having dreams about him too. In the dreams, he'd come in with his laundry like normal, but then after he started his loads, he'd go into the back storage room where we kept cleaning supplies. In the dreams, I'd follow him back there and find him washing something in the utility sink. When I'd get closer to see what it was, I'd wake up. One night about 2 weeks later, the guy came in around 2:30 a.m. with his usual huge load of dark clothes. He started his machines and then headed toward the bathroom like always. But instead of going into the bathroom, I saw him turn toward the storage room. I waited a few minutes, then quietly walked to the back of the laundromat. I could hear water running in the storage room, and when I peeked around the corner, I saw him at the utility sink. He was washing what looked like a knife, scrubbing it with dish soap and a sponge. There was a small duffel bag on the floor next to him, and I could see dark stains on the outside of it. I backed away as quietly as I could and went to the front counter where I kept my phone. I called 911 and whispered what I was seeing. The operator told me to get out of the building immediately and wait outside for the police. But as I was heading for the front door, the water in the storage room stopped running. I heard footsteps coming toward the front of the laundromat. I ducked behind the change machine and watched as the guy walked back to check on his laundry. He seemed normal, like nothing had happened. But I noticed he was carrying the duffel bag with him now, and it looked empty. The police got there about 10 minutes later. They searched the storage room and found traces of blood in the utility sink that hadn't been completely washed away. They also found some personal items hidden in the ceiling tiles above the sink. A wallet belonging to Marcus, the missing guy I'd read about, and jewelry that matched descriptions from the other missing persons reports. They arrested the guy as he was trying to leave. Turns out he'd been using the laundromat to clean up after attacking people, then dumping their belongings in different places around the city. The back storage room was perfect because it was private and had running water, and who's going to question someone doing laundry at 3 a.m.? What still freaks me out is that my dreams had been showing me exactly what was happening, sometimes before it actually happened. The night I dreamed about the bloody clothes in washer 23 was apparently the same night he'd killed Marcus. I'd been seeing his crimes in my dreams for months before I realized what was going on. The police said if I hadn't called when I did, there might have been more victims. The guy had been escalating, and they found evidence that he was planning something bigger. But I can't stop thinking about how many people might still be alive if I'd figured out what my dreams meant sooner. I quit that job obviously, but I still have dreams about that laundromat sometimes. Usually they're just normal dreams about cleaning machines and folding towels. But sometimes I'll dream about things that feel too real, too specific. And now I pay attention to those dreams in a way I never did before. I guess some people are just more sensitive to things like that. I don't really understand it, and I'm not sure I want to. But I've learned that sometimes dreams aren't just dreams. Sometimes they're warnings.